No gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Okay. So clearly the game was uh, solved by last minute back rank checkmate. Even if White maybe had some strong advantage before that. Let's take a look at this game. This is not the Carol. Yeah, Carol Khan. Carol Khan. And we get into this formation where the queen captures on d5 early. This happens in the Scandinavian defense. This happens in the Carol Khan. This happens in the French defense. I believe especially the Steiner variation, as well as the accelerated Panov attack, where White will play knight c3 with tempo because he's attacking the queen on d5. And in pretty much all of these systems, like I named the Steiner variation of the French defense, the accelerated Panov attack, the Scandinavian defense, all these we are usually seeing after this attack on the queen by the knight moving to c3. The queen will go to either a5 or d8. There are also some systems that I'm seeing become more frequently recently, where the queen gets a check on e5 and less often on e6, and for good reason. It's not really the great square for the queen to be giving check. So these options, look, if you're white here and the queen moves to a5, just carry on normally until you get the chance to play bishop d2. This limits some of black's options, and who knows, maybe black gets a little bit, I don't know, lazy at the wheel. We'll just depict it this way. And you get to move the knight with an attack, but also with a discovered attack on a5. Very thematic. Black goes in for this anyway, mostly to try to garner enough pressure against the knight at c3, and he'll usually become pinned at some point there. So that's at a5. d8. When I play the Scandinavian, I'm usually moving my queen to d8 when it's time when this attack from the knight occurs. I just think yeah, okay, my pieces on the back rank are all where they started. I get that. Material is even, and white has a knight on c3. That doesn't sound like a resounding, solid advantage for white. And then usually black will have some form of open game with honest play to ensue. Then there's these more recent ways where the queen gives a check on e5. I'm pretty sure it makes a lot of sense to just block it with your queen. If the queen wants to trade, then you'll deal with a queenless middle game. It won't be the end of the world. In some situations, you might get in trouble and initiate the queen trade, and there will be a queenless middle game. That won't be the end of the world. What would be the end of the world is if you sit there on e2 too long, blocking your light squared bishop. If that becomes an issue for one reason or another, either just trade the queens already, or put your bishop on g2, your knight on f3, and castle kingside in a fianchet shadowed formation. Next, okay, so my opponent chose queen d8 as I recommend. I don't think my opponent necessarily knew I recommend that. Just happened to be the move played. And d4 is still within book. You get this pawn going, and the idea is really not necessarily with d4. I played d5 next, but the c6 square becomes critical, with perhaps a knight trying to be more natural than necessary. On c6, the knight gets pinned. The knight gets pinned. The knight gets attacked by a low value piece that's also happens to be protected. The knight gets attacked again by, in this case, an equal value piece. So yeah, there's a lot of ensuing pressure on c6. Knight to f6. Well, knight to f6 not a bad move. Get a piece into the opening. This knight is clearly exerting his influence much better than a move before. And not only that, but this is a piece that white will have a hard time bullying. Right? Even bishop g5 with the most straightforward attempt, and I believe we'll see that soon enough. It says here on move 10, bishop g5. Even bishop g5 doesn't really make much of the knight on f6. Yeah, okay. So if there's e6 or e5, then there might be a pin, but capturing towards the center or away from the center is not the end of the world for black either. In a broad open board like this, or quite a reasonably open board like this, the long range piece for a knight is a long-term asset for black. Okay, so sending all that to the side for a moment, for a few moments. Pawn to d5 begins to show white's teeth against the c6 square. Bishop g4 is a bad move. Happens. People make bad moves. It's a move. My opponent's trying to get his bishop out into play, and maybe with tempo against the queen at d1, because the bishop is supported by the knight. So if I sort of lazily capture on g4 and then I lose my queen as a result, and black's gonna win that game. But I didn't play like that. I have moves like bishop e2. I wouldn't really play knight f3. Why would you jump into a pin that is actually kind of strong there for black? But I played f3. And this got marked as an inaccuracy as well. Strange. I wouldn't have thought so. It doesn't, this dark square diagonal is now a little bit weaker if I'm going to castle kingside. So the assassin computer, which I believe is Torch 4, might be seeing this as a weakening of white's king safety. So then probably bishop to e2. Let's take a look on this page. This is another great page to help you analyze your chess games. Bishop g4, f3 was seen as bad. I want to know bishop e2. Okay, so bishop e2 is one of the top 5 moves, and they're pretty bunched. With this being about a half a pawn better for white, and this being not even 8/10 of a pawn better for white. So these moves are to be treated by the chess player as relatively equal in terms of strength or value, really. And the player should choose a move that he feels with which he feels comfortable. There is some extra notes to be given to bishop b5 check, with the best move then listed as bishop d7. Then this bishop has moved back at the loss of time, and to the effect of white's light squared bishop developing. That's a better board. Look, here it is on the mini board. Let's look into this a little more closely. First, then we were here, and white moved, and we're looking partly at bishop g4 and how come it's not such a great move. Really, I'm recommending bishop d7 here. That's just a good move. It's more, prophylactic, if you will. It just prevents all this garbage on a4 to e8. Not garbage in like it's a bad way to play chess, but black doesn't want that. This is not helping black. Any attacks on a4 to e8 don't help black. So bishop to d7 is going to cut out almost all of that. But what my opponent played was bishop to g4, and then the torch 4 suggests bishop to b5 check, and I'm going to allow myself to amend the move here because Torch's calculations showed bishop to d7, and now the bishop has just moved here and back, and like I said, I'm just developed as a result. I could just trade on d7, or even continue the attack. I'd probably trade on d7. The thing is that the attack 1, 2, 3, 4. Get your woman on the floor. No, yeah, but that the attack, there are many defenders. So I don't think this attack's going to work for white. But note that if you do want to play queen a5, this will probably be an inaccuracy or a good. It's listed as a good move. If you do want to play queen a5, that black does not have this move that would otherwise be annoying. Pawn to a6. I mean, he has it. He can make it, but it's just getting really tricky because there's also now a pawn on the a. There is also now a pin on the a pawn, and when pawn captures on b5, white will capture on a8 and have won the exchange. So that's the point I want to make, that the queen can contribute in a way that pins the pawn. All right, back to the game as it occurred. I played f3. I got away with it because bishop to f5 does not make use of the weakening of this diagonal, or it's not the best move. Torch 4 suggests bishop c8, reversal of what I said about the bishop doubling back from g4. We're seeing this bishop g4 move isn't working in a lot of different lines, because bishop to c8 is just, again, back where he came from and wasting tempi. Bishop b5 check. White had something better, it seems, like g4. Getting a little bit crazy with my kingside pawns here, so yeah, I decided not to play g4, at least not then. I think I play it later on. But we're going to take advantage of some of these, we're going to take advantage of our control of c6. We're going to try to double bishop and queen as a battery against d7. Bishop to g5 shows that I'm trying to undermine some of d7's defense. And then a6 is the proper move here to scare away my bishop. After b5, I make a mistake, I believe. White would be better just to admit his faults on this bishop foray, or on this queenside attack, and move to b3 or possibly c2. I can't imagine that would be too wrong, right? Here it is as one of the top moves. I would most likely move bishop to b3 or c2. I'm still not going to g4 because I think it's long-term too weakening against my king's castling. Look, that if the king castles queenside, he's on an open c-file. If the king castles kingside, then this g1 a7 diagonal is a real issue, and even more of an issue if there's no pawn wall in front of him on the g file. So I'm thinking king safety in part about this, and also I wanted to do something to give the game a little more pep, some liveliness to it. And you would think maybe knight takes b5, a takes b5, bishop takes b5, keeps pin on the d7 knight. I had some issue with that just because there are so many defenders around. to help defend the knight on d7. He's not weak. He's gonna be adequately defended. We even add the king as a defender here. I don't think knight takes b5 was a good move. Bishop takes b5 wasn't a good move either. But we march on. One of the main reasons bishop b5 wasn't good is because queen a5 check. My opponent's playing strong and accurate chess, hitting the b5 knight while putting my king in check. There's really it looks like there's a number of moves here which are good. There aren't, because say we block and then my opponent picks up a full knight on b5. So the move to be played was knight to c3. I found it, and now I'm in a bit of a hole against my opponent, who has a material lead and much stronger central presence, mostly with pieces. So I have to sort of scramble to make my king safe, or find some kind of dynamic complicating factor where I might win out as by the way of a calculation. Bishop takes f6 is mostly because there's a temptation on the part of black. I bet my opponent took a few seconds to move here. Yeah. Well. Maybe not. He took 9 seconds. She or they took 9 seconds on this move 17. But the point is, the more natural move after knight takes f6 is queen takes d4, perhaps neglecting, and it would be neglecting, not perhaps, but neglecting that the bishop can skirt back to d4 and be ahead the knight that had previously been on f6. So it's like a capture twice in a row kind of scenario. My opponent didn't fall for that. She or they are still playing good quality, accurate chess. The queen, and he has the initiative against me. So the queen captures queen on d4, knight captures d4, and we have this end game. It's a queenless end game with a decent amount of minor pieces. Other features: 2 connected passed pawns on the queen side, and another passed pawn on the towards the center on the d file. So let's see if maybe white can make a game out of trying to progress and promote at least one of those pawns. Okay, white's back in it. So I said earlier about bishop takes f6, and then maybe my opponent will play the natural move, and I'll cut back to go up a piece. This is another thing. It's one of these visual tactics. They happen to humans and not computers or stuff. They can happen to anybody, really. The point is, my knight moves to e4, and the thought process might be on what kind of aggressive moves does that knight have? How does this affect, the bishop in this? But I've also, by way of blocking the bishop's line, have sort of a strange attack against the knight on d3. I think my opponent fell for it in a complicated way. Bishop to b4 check seems okay because I move, and then this part of it can't happen yet, but it can because he's right next door. I capture the knight, and there's no way to utilize this pin on e4 in any way that's all that scary for white. Good castle. Trying to black is playing daring moves here. Bishop takes e4 while the other bishop is in the midst of hanging. Now, is it really that good a move to warrant that? You might want to move your bishop back to e7, as Torch 4 suggests. But there's bishop takes e4, pawn takes e4. Now, notice that White's king never castled this game. You notice he's actually kind of safe. First of all, he's on an opposite color square from the bishop. He's got pawns and a knight helping to protect, and he'll soon have this c file. The f file looks good, but it's kind of clogged up. So White's king is actually active, almost safe. Black's king is definitely safe and not close to being active. Pawn to b4. My opponent found this nifty move, and the computer, it's not computer best move, but you have to think, well, what the heck am I doing? This knight standing, this is a pin. This is a kind of a weak pin because it's a minor piece against a rook, but a pin nonetheless. I think I probably thought for a while on this one. Yeah, for 29 seconds I thought, almost half a minute I thought, and decided eventually to move pawn to a4 and respond to the situation flexibly. There are ways to respond to this situation flexibly. One would be, we could do a5 and then not have to worry about the a file and just kind of move on to any file that the a1 rook would like to go. Any file that might make sense for that rook. But in other situations or with other moves intervening, b5 might be good. I played b5 here. It's a good way. My opponent is showing, to me, the move rook a5 means my opponent is showing he or they are going to double on the a file, right? So I want to move out of the way of the pin. Now the problem is, how do I defend this one pawn on a4 adequately? More or less decided not to, and I'll give away a little bit of material to have my opponent's long-range minor piece off the board. Okay, so here I played rook to c1, rook to b1, I think would make more sense. Get directly behind the pawn and just, what's black going to do? He's going to have to backpedal to b8, then 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 5s would be to capture. The king is very slow to react to the pawn pushes. In the meantime, there's d6, there's king c4, there's king d5, there's king takes e5, even if he reflexively protects e5 in advance, or this is a nightmare to defend for black. Now rook to c1, however, takes advantage of an interesting idea. It forces a move that slows down black's momentum. Black needs to play something like g6 or h6, or probably best of all, f6, because otherwise it's mate on c8, rook to c8 checkmate. Or I guess black could backpedal all the way to a8, but then suffer the fates of a pawn surging towards promotion. Right, and my opponent failed to see the imminent danger, and so I played rook to c8 checkmate. Now this is a good position. I want to play this position against the computer. Let's see if I can win this rook and pawn endgame. I'll play the same game I played the same move I played in the real game. Because part of my idea was, so my opponent, this is another move good for that's a better move than these pawn moves I suggested, getting closer to the action earlier. So this is really definitely the way to go. However, I think I can make things difficult for black. protecting this. My opponent would have to play to e3. I think that I can still protect in time. And then upon rook e2, just push to g3, have all my pawns nice and well protected here. And take rook a1. We have time to push black's king back away from the fray, so to speak. So I like the idea here. It'll probably cost us one of the connected pawns. So white has 3 extra pawns in a rook and pawn endgame. Actually, white has 3 pawns and a rook to a king and a rook is the better way to say that, frankly. I'm going to try to make better use of my king defense. If we could go over here. King d3 is good. Notice my king is becoming more and more active towards black's side of the board. So here's a nifty trick, is to cut off the black's attack against the g pawn by playing rook to g5. Trades are crazy, right? If black wants to trade there, I'm going to easily win with 3 pawns. So he's got to, it's the computer. It has to find some other move. But it doesn't mean that it's not necessarily true. Might not be true that there's another move available. Okay. All right, guys. This back here to the original game. The original game ended with this back rank checkmate. So we amended. We kept c1 and we amended rook to a5 instead. Became king to f8. That's on move 31. Let's check that to be sure. Move 31. Rook to a5 became king to f8. Alright. And I'd like to see how this game was in terms of accuracy as a result. Okay. Accurate. Pretty darn accurate. Not extreme, but accurate. Okay, that's gonna be it for tonight. Or at least for this streaming session. Alright, thank you for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm More Gravity. Have a great night.